My name is Sharon R. Chickering, Esquire, and the date is April 6, 2023. I'm interviewing Maryellen Goodlatte, Esquire, one of the first women attorneys to practice in the 23rd Judicial District of the Commonwealth of Virginia, encompassing Roanoke City, Roanoke County, and the City of Salem. This interview is part of the oral history project of the Roanoke chapter of the Virginia Women Attorneys Association, recording the oral histories of the first women attorneys to practice in the Roanoke Valley. In 1970-71, there were no women attorneys on the membership roster of the Roanoke Bar Association or practicing in the Roanoke Valley. By 1978, there were fewer than 10 women attorneys practicing in the Roanoke Valley, including our interviewee today, Maryellen Goodlatte. We are conducting the interview in the Roanoke office of the law firm of Woods Rogers Van Deventer Black. The videographer is Melissa Stevens, and the stenographer is Catherine Ford, who has generously donated her time and expertise to this project. Maryellen, do I have your permission to record this interview?
Yes, you do, Sharon.
So please tell us your full name, where and when you were born, the names of your family members, and a little bit about your childhood.
Sure. Well, my full name is Maryellen Flaherty Goodlatte. I was born in April 1952 in Norwood, Massachusetts. Norwood is a suburb of Boston. At that time, it truly was a suburb, its own little small town. It's now been encompassed into the greater Boston metropolitan area. But I had a lovely childhood. My parents came to the U.S. from Ireland, so became naturalized citizens. So I am a first-generation American. And just had a marvelous childhood. Very, very Irish, obviously, in terms of its orientation. And Boston being a center of Irish American activity, it was a very warm and loving childhood. So had a marvelous time. Was the oldest of 4 children, and I think that might be enough.
Okay. So what is your educational background and your college experience?
Sure. Well, after high school, I went to Bates College. Bates is in Lewiston, Maine. It's a small liberal arts college, and it really was a dream of mine. I was planning or sort of expecting that I would be a commuter, that I would commute into one of the Boston state schools. Applied to Bates thinking that it would be an impossibility, but it turned out to be a possibility. I worked my way through Bates and just had a marvelous time there. I learned a lot during my 4 years there. It really expanded my thought about what I could do, where I could go, and it kind of expanded my worldview.
In what way?
Well, I came from a very insulated world, and a world where even my going to college was a stretch. I was the first in my family to graduate from high school, never mind college. And the expectation was that I would get a job after high school. So commuting into Boston was seen as a great step. Going away to Maine for 4 years was seen like a crazy idea. At that point, my dad had passed away, so my mother was a single mother. I was the oldest of 4 children. And she's actually still around, I'm grateful to say. She's 99 years old.
My goodness.
Still living in the Boston area. But, that was a sacrifice for her to kind of let me go. So I just felt free when I was at Bates. It was a small school. I liked that atmosphere, great interaction with professors, just a marvelous experience for me. I then went on, I was a major in history and minor in economics. Then went to W&L Law School from Bates. Met my husband at Bates, Bob. He was in the same class as I was. We moved to Lexington. He was a year ahead of me at W&L. We had actually applied. I decided late on in my college career that law school was an interest of mine. I pretty much thought that I would be a teacher. That was sort of where I was aiming. But kind of halfway through my college career, one of my professors, a woman in the history department, really encouraged me to think strongly about law school and suggested that I could be of better use to society as a lawyer rather than as a teacher, although teachers clearly are important. But she thought that would suit me better. She actually recommended that I take some math courses, thinking that math would be an aid in preparing for law school. I reluctantly did that because math was not an area that I thought was a strong suit of mine. But I did it. I agreed with her in retrospect, and even today when young people talk to me about preparing for law school, I suggest that they not be afraid of math courses. Take math courses. It's a great way to build logical understanding into how they approach problems and problem solving. But anyway, I did move on to law school. Bob and I moved to Lexington. He went to W&L a year ahead of me. I worked for a year in Buena Vista with what was then the First National Exchange Bank. That was also a great experience because it was a small branch bank. I got to basically do everything. I got to do the administrative stuff. I got to make loans. I got to run the proof machine. I got to be a teller. So I learned a lot about banking, which ended up serving me well when I first began practicing law, because I then my firm represented United Virginia Bank. Back then it was United Virginia Bank of Roanoke, N.A., which became, what did it become? Crestar and SunTrust and Truist and whatever else it became over the years. So that was just a fantastic learning experience for me. The following year I began at W&L.
Okay. And what was the difference between Bates and W&L in terms of women and...
Yes, a big difference. At Bates's ratio of men to women was 60% men, 40% women.
Wow.
And interestingly enough, back then, I graduated from Bates in '74 along with Bob. That was a rigid ratio for them. I hope that's changed. I think that's changed. But even back when Bob and I went to Bates for a reunion in probably 2000, 1999, around there, sat in on one of the sessions that they used in order to make a final decision about who they would be admitting the following year. They thought that would be useful for us to see. And I learned then about the concept of male filler, which surprised me. Even then, in order to get to that 60% quota that they had,
right.
They admitted men who were certainly not the academic equals of women. So they were the male filler. And I thought to myself, oh, this is not so good. And they've changed that, thankfully. But that wasn't all that long ago.
It wasn't.
When that was considered to be an appropriate way to balance. That was their idea of diversity back in the late 90s and early 2000s.
And then at W&L, it was 72 before they let women into the college.
Well, they were forced to let women in. They were at risk of losing their accreditation as a law school if they did not admit women into the law school. So we were just a few and far between. My class was the third class that admitted women to W&L. And there were maybe, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 of us. There weren't that many of us in those classes. Obviously, that's changed a lot as the years have gone on, which is a really good thing. But at Bates, I just embraced every aspect of collegiate life. Very involved in student activities, very involved in lots of things. At W&L, it was very different, very focused. Of course, at that point, I was married, so my lifestyle was different at that point. Lexington at that point was very male. We had a few women in the law school. We had no women in the undergraduate university, and then, of course, VMI was right next door. So it was an interesting place to be a female student at that point in time. But I viewed law school back then as a means to an end. I knew what I wanted. I just kind of worked through the process. Law school was not, for me anyway, a time where I just loved law school compared to my experience at Bates. I contrast that with my daughter, who went to law school. She's a UVA undergrad in law school, and she loved law school, very involved in student activities, even to this day, still involved in a lot of law school activities. So I think that was a good thing. I think I was a little bit too rigid back during my time. Maybe it was because of the flavor of what that world looked like back then. I just wanted to do the best I could. I wanted to be ready in classes, because I think even to this day the Socratic method is still the preferred way of training lawyers. Right. That was a little intimidating for me. And it started out especially intimidating because I think I mentioned Bob was there a year before I started. And so we were newly married, so when he would go to the law library, which is where you studied back then, the internet was a new thing on the horizon, everyone went to the law library, I would go too, and I would read, I'd do whatever I was doing. So I got to know the professors at the law school, and they got to know me. So when I was a first-year student, they had a real problem with their software at the beginning of the year. They tended to generate kind of Facebooks for the professors with the names and the pictures of the students, right, so they would know who to call on. So the first few days they did not have that Facebook. The only face they knew in the audience was mine. So on the first day in every single class, I was the one called on, for the whole class, wow, to address the professor's questions. And I came home after that first day and thought, I don't think law school is for me, because it was a rough start. But I stuck it out, and I'm grateful. I'm very grateful that I did. I'm just appreciate what W&L did for me, the training that I received there, the background, the ability to think as a lawyer and help clients, people kind of solve problems. So looking back, I'm so grateful that I had the experiences I did at Bates, which kind of brought me out of my little world, right, and then law school, which I never thought I would get to go, never mind complete, and practice law. So I'm very grateful for the opportunities I've had.
Do you think that the professors treated you differently as a female?
I don't think so. I don't remember feeling that way. I started off on that very weird arrangement because they did know me, but I didn't feel that I was called out in any special sort of way.
Okay. And so you graduated in 1978, is that correct?
I did. Graduated in 78.
Admitted to the bar in Virginia in
Correct.
78.
Correct.
Okay. And so what inspired your decision to come to Roanoke?
Well, Bob, my husband, got a job in Roanoke. He was a year ahead of me in law school, and he got a job working for the then Congressman Caldwell Butler, who represented the 6th District of Virginia back in the 70s. And he ran his district offices, but that position was in Roanoke. And I was really thrilled because I got to complete my term at W&L. So I commuted from Roanoke to Lexington that last year. That was in the days of 50 cent a gallon gasoline, so it was a little bit easier. And so that brought us to Roanoke. We really were not certain where we would have ended up, but that was a great position for Bob. He got to learn about this part of Virginia, got to know a lot of people. He did that for about a year and a half, almost 2 years, then opened his own law practice. So he was a couple of years behind me in the actual practice of law. But he laid a nice foundation for himself for what would be later a political career by working for Caldwell Butler.
So what attracted you to Bob?
Well, for one thing, of course I knew him at Bates, and Bates is a small school. It was really his integrity. It was his, the qualities that I saw in him that resonated in me. Bob was, toward the end of our time at Bates, and really when I got to know him really well, he was the president of the student body and student government, and he needed to appoint a treasurer, and our people were interviewed. I was one of them, and he ended up appointing me as treasurer. So we got to work really closely in terms of the student government at the college, and that's where I really learned a lot about him. And it really is those qualities that attracted me and still do.
So he started his own firm, and what did you do when you first went into practice?
When I first went into practice, I worked for the firm of what was then Wetherington, Flippin, Melchona, Bosserman, and Burton. A great civil practice firm. I had during my last year of law school, I had the privilege of working for Bill Poff. Bill Poff Bill Poff was, as you know, just he was kind of the lawyer's lawyer for all of us. And he was good enough to give me a job, doing research, writing briefs. I would work in the Woods Rogers Library. And that's how I got to know some of the attorneys in Roanoke, and was accepted as an associate at the Wetherington Flippin firm, and did a lot of, as I mentioned, bank work at the time, a lot of litigation in my early years at that law firm, and just really had a great start to my law practice.
So tell me a little bit about how you were you the only female at the
Yes. Yes.
And how were you treated?
I was treated fine. I think they maybe didn't quite know what to do with me, didn't quite know how to treat me, but thankfully I have a pretty rough skin, and so nothing seemed to bother me. You know, clients would wonder about me, would assume that maybe I was a secretary or a paralegal, but once they got to know me, they realized that I was actually an attorney and would be representing them or helping them in one matter or another. But it was a great law firm. I learned a lot. In a smaller law firm, you know, you often learn sort of by doing and having some backup. So I did not have a long period of mentorship, if you will. It was sort of sink or swim,
right.
Because that's what a smaller law firm really expects of its attorneys. They don't have the luxury of letting you train for a year or two, but expect you to dig into something, to ask questions if you feel like you need help, seek out others if you need it, but otherwise to be as self-motivating as you can be, as quickly as you can be. So that worked for me. That's the type of person that I am, so I found that to suit me just fine.
So did you have any particular mentors at the firm?
Really, they were all mentors of mine in a small firm. I learned a lot. Some of them had different types of practices. Some, again, were more litigation-oriented. Some were more corporate. Some were tax. And I just felt like I was appreciated and that I was part of a firm. You know, we were not sort of sole practitioners. It was a large enough firm, so everybody felt like they were all in it together, and I valued that.
And how about the members of the bar? There were very few women, so how were you received by the male members of the bar?
Overall, quite well. Certainly some of the older members of the bar did not quite know how to treat me. I had some marvelous experiences with a number of them. You know, some of them were just way too deferential, and they didn't realize it until after they lost. So, you know, but I tried not to, you know, gloat. I tried to be respectful of them, but I just wondered to myself, why are you doing this? But I had to take advantage of it in order to, you know, do what I had to do for a client.
Do you have any kind of specific example of what
well,
that deference looks like?
I don't want to name names.
Oh no, that's okay.
Right,
I got you.
Right.
Yeah.
But they were the older members of the bar, and they were extremely deferential to me. And you know, they realized as time went on that they were more than they should have been in that regard.
And how did you feel you were received by judges?
Wonderfully. I mean, I have felt from the start that we are blessed in our part of Virginia to have a tremendous judiciary. You know, Judge Ernest Ballou at the time was marvelous to me. In fact, the first bench trial I had was with Judge Ballou, and it so happened that opposing counsel was a new attorney as well, Jim Joyce with Gentry Locke. We were coming out about the same time, and Judge Ballou really loved that. He loved the fact that he had two brand new lawyers facing each other for the first time in his courtroom, and he really we learned a lot from him, and just really appreciated him. Judge Coulter was legendary as well. You know, he would want all new attorneys to come and get their picture taken with him, talk with him. invite them to his home. It was just marvelous. So they were just good people. And I, of course, knew that Virginia had a system of judges being appointed by the General Assembly. And one would think that that might result in some difference of skill levels, or one being more political than another. And I'm grateful to say I just don't see that. I think whether the Democrats control the Assembly or the Republicans, we have gotten great judges in our part of Virginia. So I'm appreciative of that. I've also had experiences with judges in further areas beyond the Roanoke Valley. And I remember one in particular that I went to. I knew that this was not a judge in the 23rd Circuit. It was a judge further in Southwest Virginia. I knew that that judge was a graduate of W&L Law School. So I thought to myself, well, I'm going to go introduce myself and just to say hi to the judge before this case gets started. So I did that and went back into the judge's chambers and had a nice conversation with him. But toward the end, he said something to me that, shook me a little bit. He said he was a proud graduate of W&L Law School, but felt they did two things really badly. One was to move to the new law school. My class was the last class that had a year in Tucker Hall, which was on the Colonnade, the old law school, then moved to Lewis Hall, the new law school. He said, we did not need that new law school. Tucker Hall was appropriate. That was the best place to learn how to be a lawyer, and he went on and on about that. And then the second thing they did was they admitted women. And I thought, oh my goodness, here I am. So we kind of ended that conversation, then went on to the case at bar. But that was the only judge that I ever experienced and he meant it. He meant it at the time. Now, over the years, I interacted with him a few times in the years following, and he did mellow. He recognized that the times had changed, and having women admitted to the law school was right and just. But that was a little bit disconcerting. I kind of stepped in it.
I can imagine. So how long were you at Wetherington Malshona?
I was with them until Jennifer, our daughter, was born in 1984. The firm had experienced, like firms do, a bit of a breakup, and so some attorneys left, and I was one of them. I went with Frank Flippen to what was then the Glenn, Eggleston Glenn firm, the law firm, and that's where I have stayed since then. It became Glenn Feldman, and now it's Glenn Feldman, Darby, and Goodlatte.
So when you started to have children, how did that affect your ability to practice law?
It really did change the type of my practice. Up to that point, I had really done more litigation work, but I recognized that I couldn't just take off and go to, Richmond or Newport News and for 3 days for depositions. That did not make sense to me. So I began to retool my practice. I did a lot more land use, development work, things where I thought I had more control over my schedule, at least where I felt like I would not need to be away regularly dealing with the requirements of a litigation schedule. Mm-hmm. So that really was what drove me to change the type of practice that I had. But my firm was very good about, giving me time to do that. And I think long term that worked out just fine for me. I did develop a lot of a land use practice in particular, and that's been interesting and rewarding.
So your children were born in 1984?
1984 and 1986. Right.
So your daughter is?
She will soon be close to 40. I mean, I know, it's time. And I've got 2 grandchildren who want me to spend more time with them. They live in Arlington, so they're not too far away, but they're not right around the corner either.
And then your son?
Son he went to Duke, and right after he graduated from Duke, he headed to a little startup in San Francisco called Facebook, which had been recruiting him and actually wanted him to quit school. And he still chides me for not letting him drop out of Duke and go to Facebook, 2 years earlier. I told him he needed his education. Long term, he did the right thing. He's done great. He's in the technology world. He was in San Francisco for a number of years, is now in Miami. There seems to be more of a tech community developing around Miami. So he's happy. He's single, but very much involved in the technology world.
So during the time that you were pregnant, how did practice go? How did the judges treat you? How did you get accommodated around having children, nursing,
Right,
those sorts of
right.
things?
I think, again, the world has changed for the better for young women today. When I had children, it was not accommodating at all, at all. You know, I expected to have maybe 6 weeks at home with the baby. I had about 2 before I had to go back to the practice. You know, so today law firms are much more accommodating to the needs of young mothers. I see that with my own daughter who has 2 children, and appreciate very much the time that she was given to you know, take care of those children, the time that her husband was given as well to help with the rearing of really young babies. That's a really good thing. That was not the case when my kids were born.
So were there any judges or fellow attorneys that you particularly admired during your practice?
Well, yes. Judge Turk in the federal court, I mean, I just really appreciated Judge Turk. You know, the way he handled young lawyers was legendary. Some of his sayings are legendary. Yes. Judge Wilson, Judge Sam Wilson, who's now retired. Of course, Judge Ballou was just a huge favorite of mine, starting with that very first trial that I had. His son, Robert, is now a U.S. District Court judge, and he has a lot of those same qualities that Judge Ballou exemplified. You know, I have appreciate Judge Robert Ballou's, when he was a magistrate judge, handling a lot of mediations in federal court, and you know, I just saw his dad almost in the way he handled a lot of those cases, so that was just really lovely. So again, we've just had amazing judges. Judge Strickland, I can't forget Judge Strickland. I'm just so proud of the fact that she was a circuit court judge. Amazing in every sort of way. I'm grateful for the drug court that she started. I mean, she started that program, and that's made a huge impact on the whole of the Commonwealth. Just an amazing person. She was an amazing lawyer when she practiced at Woods Rogers. No doubt that she would have been a tremendous circuit court judge. I'm glad she had that opportunity. I think it's time for there to be more female judges like Judge Strickland here in our circuit. We have had a number put themselves out, and I know how difficult it is to put yourself out for that process. But we need more, because I think they do bring a special sense of their own experiences to that bench that helps the practice of law and the general community. But we have a tremendous amount of attorneys that have, and judges that have made a huge difference.
So as we noted in the introduction, there were fewer than 10 women attorneys practicing in Roanoke when you started to practice law at the end of the 70s. And one of those was Judge Strickland, which, just for the record, she was one of the other oral histories we have done, and she became a judge in 1992, and I believe retired in 2002.
Yes, and still serves as a mediator with the McGammon Group. In fact, I've used her for mediation services because I just admire the way she thinks, the way she deals with people. All the qualities that made her a great judge continue to make her a great mediator.
So at that time, how did you and the other female attorneys in the Valley get together? What was your interaction with one another?
We would keep up with each other. Angelica Lloyd was sort of one of the pivot points, as was Judge Strickland, just to try to reach out to each other, catch up with each other from time to time. Linda Steele was one of the early attorneys too, but she left. A lot of us were married at that time in our lives. Linda was not, and I think back when she was practicing law, and she's still since passed away, but there were few social activities for young professional women. Thankfully, that has changed a lot. I think Roanoke is now seen as a place where someone can work as a professional and still have a very active, vibrant social life. So she did leave the Roanoke area to practice law in a larger community. But there were a few of us, and we did keep tabs on each other, tried to help each other as we could. I know that there's a much more vibrant group today, which is wonderful, because I do think that women attorneys can help each other in all aspects of their lives, not just their practice lives, but their civic lives and their family lives too.
And did you feel that was the way the group was?
Yes, I did. I think today is much more organized. Of course, now there's a Women's Attorneys Association, and women professionals in general have more opportunities to interact than we did in the early years of my practice.
And actually, if I'm correct, a number of women attorneys in practice were also married to attorneys. And Angelica Lloyd, who worked for Norfolk Western, and Diana Perkinson and Diane Strickland,
Right.
Judge Strickland, as we just talked about, and Betty Jo Anthony.
Right.
Do you feel that affected the way that your relationships, or the way that you experienced practicing law in the Valley and the way you were treated?
I don't know that made a difference in the way that we were treated. I do think it added another dimension to one's life. Obviously one has a professional life and one has a family life as well. And so your activities outside of your law practice kind of revolve around your family, your budding family. So I think that, for me anyway, and then it kind of went on for me in terms of the political aspect, because my husband ran for office in 91, 92, so then I had another element to deal with. So that just compartmentalized my life, maybe more than might be good. So I do encourage young people today to, continue with their friendships from law school, from college, and not let those parts of their lives just sort of be sacrificed to the immediate needs of family, civic involvement and the law practice.
So in 1992, when Bob was elected to this 6th Congressional District, tell me where you were in your practice and what decisions y'all made about how you were going to handle this.
Right. Well, at that point, I had pretty much transitioned to not heavy on the litigation side. So I had already, with the birth of our children at that point were pretty young. Our oldest was in kindergarten. Our oldest was 2nd grade. The youngest was in kindergarten. So they were both in school, which was good. So we knew we'd have to deal with the challenges of him being out of the area. We decided that it just made much more sense for us to stay in Roanoke. For one thing, Roanoke is where my law practice was centered. Roanoke is where our children were going to school, 2nd grade and kindergarten at Fishburne Park Elementary School in the city, and we felt like that was a place for them to have a normal childhood and not to drag them up to the Washington area. So that made sense. Obviously, his being not home for a good bit of time meant that I had more responsibilities, but we worked that out. That's not that uncommon. A lot of families have to deal with one spouse or another, having a job that takes him or her away from the family for a period of time. So we made that work. Maybe I am looking back on it with rose-colored glasses because I'm sure I see how my daughter now is dealing with her 2 youngsters.
Yes.
And I know that it takes a lot of work to raise children. And Bob certainly was there every moment that he could be there. And we brought our kids along with us, on the weekends when he was home and we were having to travel around the district. And it's a big district. At that point, it ranged from Roanoke in the south up to Rockingham County, Harrisonburg in the north, east to Lynchburg, west to the West Virginia line. So that was a lot of communities that felt like they needed to see their congressman and his family all the time. So we tried to oblige. So we tried to make it a learning experience for the kids. And we took them on every vacation that we took. We took the children with us. We really did not have a vacation on our own, which probably in retrospect was not the smartest thing to do. I encourage my daughter and her husband to take breaks, and then I go up to Northern Virginia and babysit for my grandchildren. Maybe I have an ulterior motive in suggesting that they go away for a weekend, but that's just the way we operated. You know, when we would take a 2-week vacation, we would take the children with us. Now that, you know, to Europe, that was really before Bob got elected. That was more difficult to do once he got elected because we did not have the luxury of taking that much time off. But they were always part of everything that we did. So when I speak with people that are thinking about a political career, you know, I encourage them to have a really heart-to-heart with their spouse, their significant other, just to be certain that everybody is on board, and for them to recognize that, you know, there are going to be impacts on the family if when one person decides to go into public service. So that they need to have that wide open, because I've seen too many cases of people that will do that, will get into public office, and then will find, you know, that they have to leave for one reason or another, and family is usually close to the core of the reason that pulls them away.
Well, I note that in a Roanoke interview in 2005, Bob described you as a full-time lawyer, a full-time mother, and almost went full-time on my first campaign.
Well, you know, that first campaign was just funny because Bob had never run for public office, ever. He had worked for Caldwell Butler, as I told you at the beginning, but then he had been in private practice for, you know, a decade or more. So he had to transition his law practice, and at some point he realized that he had given away all of his clients, so if he did not win that election, he would be out of a job. Maybe a little extra motivation. But, you know, it was very exciting. You know, it was a busy time, but a lot of fun too. We would have volunteers almost every night of the week at our dining room table, stuffing envelopes, licking stamps, handwriting things, you know, me among them, doing all the things that you need to do, driving to mass meetings, you know, to talk to the folks there as the nominating conventions led up to nominating a candidate to run for that seat. You know, I thought that Monterey was a long way away from Roanoke, and I realized, well, it really isn't. I can get there and get back and speak to the group. So we kind of divided and conquered. You know, I would go to some places, he would go to others in order to do everything that you could. Because the great thing about an election is there's a deadline. You know that it's going to end. Hopefully these days, I don't know. But you know that it's going to end, so you just work as hard as you can up until that deadline. And thankfully, he was elected. He enjoyed his years in the Congress and got to do some pretty cool things and got to, you know, just had an amazing career. But it did involve a lot of time away from his family and did put a lot of responsibilities on our kids, frankly. And, you know, I don't know that I really appreciated that so much when they were going through it. I think I now, looking back, realize that was a lot to ask of a kid in kindergarten to have to deal with his dad being a member of Congress,
right,
and what other kids did and didn't do to him. So, you know.
Right. Well, in 1997, 1998, you became the first woman president of the Roanoke Bar Association. Is that right? Yes,
that's right. It took a while, didn't it?
It did. Tell me about that experience and what you feel that you accomplished. Was there objection to you think,
no,
based on?
I don't think, Sharon. I had been working on a number of committees of the bar. You know, the bar encourages all of its attorneys to be active in committee. So I guess I was a known quantity, and you know, you work up through that process. You 1 year you are the program committee chairman, so you're responsible for getting all the programs. Then you are the chairman, you're the president of the bar. Then the next year, as the immediate past president, you work on the foundation, and that was one of the great things that I'm grateful that I had the ability to be part of. During my tenure, Charlie Cornelison preceded me, right. Then it was me, then it was Charlie Judge Dorsey who followed me. And we began as a pilot program, well, we began the foundation, the Roanoke Bar Foundation. We started off with the scholarship. Jimmy Kincannon had been a prior secretary forever and ever and ever, and we thought we would never, know how to deal without Jimmy Kincannon, but established that, funded the Kincannon scholarships to young law students, but then wanted to do a little bit more. We started the Barrister Book Buddy program back then, and that was a lot of fun. That was, it started off as a summer pilot program, because Roanoke City Schools at that time had made a real big point of stressing that by the 3rd grade, all children needed to be reading at grade level. So that was a real goal and a mission of theirs. So we worked with the school system to create a pilot program. It was just a summer program, and we were going to go in and read to the children and provide books for them to take over their summer vacation. So I went up to the Green Valley Book Fair. Don't know whether you've been there. It's outside of Harrisonburg, Virginia. It's a great place. And they're good about giving nonprofits a bit of a break. So the foundation bought a ton of books so that we could give every child in the, I think it was the 2nd grade at that point, a book to take home with them over the summertime. And then that just developed into what continues to be the Barrister Book Buddy program, and I think it's celebrating maybe its 20th year or something.
They just
soon.
Announced they were going forward with it again this year, yes.
And you know, that is such a good thing. Education is so critical, and so the bar wanted to be a partner with the school system to just find ways to make reading fun. So the Barrister Book Buddies program was born, and I'm really proud that got started and that caught steam with the members of the bar. And I know I enjoyed that, and I know other attorneys enjoy that as well, and the kids love it, the teachers appreciate it, and I think it's all for good cause.
So you also have received recognition as a leader in the legal community with several different groups and organizations. Can you kind of go through what all the accolades are?
No, because I just figure a lot of that is just a function of longevity, Sharon, because there are a lot of worthy people out there. So, I'm not, don't keep up with those. I appreciate hearing about them. But, I just think as a lawyer, you want to be ready, serve your clients well, serve your community well, and at the end of the day, feel like you did everything you possibly could and you did it the right way. And, I guess I started practicing law back when attorneys really did not promote themselves. That world has changed, obviously, and that's perfectly fine. So I just sort of come from that old mindset, I think.
Well, I'll just mention a couple and then we'll move on. But you were named to the Virginia Lawyers Weekly inaugural listing of influential women in Virginia. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that you've been named to the Legal Elite by Virginia Business Magazine and voted as a super lawyer by members of the legal community. Tell me a little bit about what your feeling is about the importance of recognizing women for their accomplishments or contributions in the law now. Do you think that those accolades are important still?
I do. I still think that's important. Now, maybe my hope is that a couple of generations beyond me will find that isn't necessity, because I'm really grateful to see that women have risen to run law firms, to certainly be judges, be elevated to the highest courts in the land. So at some point, I think we can stop focusing on those things, but for now, I think it really is important. I think you want to encourage young women to think bravely and boldly and strive for those careers that will advance them up the ladder. So yeah, I do. At some point, my hope is that they are not necessary, but I think it's a way to distinguish somebody, a way to encourage young attorneys to continue to stay in the legal profession. We hear these days in particular about so many people in so many different professions not feeling as if they're getting a sense of reward from what they do. I don't want that to infect the legal profession, because I really think we have a unique ability to make a difference just by the way that we have been trained, hopefully the way that we act, hopefully the way we recognize the rule of law, hopefully the way that we treat each other civilly and can be an example for others as to how they handle disputes. You know, the legal profession really is a noble one, I believe, and I'm grateful that I've had a chance to be part of it, and I want it to continue because I think society it needs it.
Maryellen, you have a strong record of civic service in the Roanoke Valley as well, having served on the boards of the Transportation Museum, the Carillion Foundation, RCG Services, and the Roanoke Regional Partnership and its Strategic Planning Advisory Council. Is that correct?
Yes, and probably a whole lot more over the years, yes.
And you're also a past president of Downtown Roanoke?
Yes.
Have I missed anything?
Yes, but that's okay. That's okay, yeah.
So what's inspired your civic commitment to the Roanoke Valley in this way?
Well, of course, part of it is what I learned about the needs of the Valley through Bob's political career and understanding and interacting with local elected officials and others. Part of it is because of my law practice, you know, which has probably an economic development focus. So a lot of the organizations that you mentioned, you know, see the importance of bringing good jobs, good opportunities, a vibrant, diverse base of commercial activity in the Roanoke region. So that probably has encouraged me a lot. I also, you know, from my own experience, feel like education is kind of the stepping stone to success. So a lot of the organizations that I've been involved with, the Educational Foundation at Virginia Western and Carillion and the school system, you know, just kind of, it was because I really want that to happen. I really want parents and others to invest in their children's education in terms of their actions. And I'm not talking about their money. Certainly a lot of organizations raise money. Love being part of the Virginia Western Educational Foundation that started the CCAP program, the Community College Access Program, which basically said to Roanoke City students, if you get a C or better by the time you graduate from high school, we will pay for your community college education. CCAP was started a number of years ago, and I'm really grateful to have been part of the group that said, yeah, let's do this and raise the money to do this, and that has grown over the years. And now people more and more recognize the value of the community college system, not only for workforce development, but as a way for young people to, in a cost-effective way, especially if they go through CCAP and it's free, get 2 years of college under their belt and then transfer to another university. There are programs that are in place for UVA, Tech, Hollins, all kinds of local 4-year colleges and universities to accept the credits from that CCAP program. So that's just one example of things that really drive me to be helpful. I would often go and speak to PTAs at the beginning of the school year, back to school nights, and just encourage the parents to get involved in their child's education. You know, talk about the things that I did when my kids were going through the system, things that they can do, simple things they can do, so their children know that education is the key to success and how important it is to take that seriously and to invest the parents' time and talents into the education that their children receive, because it's not only up to the school system. Parents have a role in that process. So a lot of what I've done has just been motivated by maybe my gratitude for having had the experiences that I had, having had the education that I had. I had a great public school education. You know, I had opportunities to go to Bates, to go to W&L, to do the things that I've done. I had parents that, you know, encouraged me to read. And you know, do well in school. So all those things are important, and I just feel like today's parents need to kind of instill that sense in their own children and really value education as a stepping stone to success. So that's one element of the civic activities that I do that really draws me in. Of course, the broader one of community development, economic development, some of that again is just driven by the work that I've done, representing developers, representing sometimes local governments, to try to make projects happen.
So in the Roanoke Valley, there's only been the one woman attorney appointed to the circuit court bench, and that was Judge Strickland, who served from, I said it a little inaccurately earlier, from 1989 to 2003, and there have been only 2 women appointed to the General District Court bench, which was Judge Strickland and then Judge Talevi, who currently is serving, and then there are 4 women judges who've been appointed to the Juvenile Court in this judicial district. What are your thoughts about these statistics and the role of, or the importance of diversity on the bench?
We need more women. We need more women in all of those courts. I think especially at the circuit court level. I'm pleased that we do have a good J&D bench. That's important because that's a critical court. You know, the general district and the J&D court are where most citizens interact with the law. So I think having women attorneys elevated to those positions on the bench are really important, not just for the women attorneys to see that, yes, we value your service and we recognize that you need to be on the bench, but really for the general community to see, because they do bring a lot to that bench. They bring that diversity of thought, diversity of experience, and I think they resonate with the people that are before them. But especially in the circuit court, I mean, that's where matters, decisions that find themselves embedded in the law will end up. So I feel like it's way past time for us having more women in our area on the circuit court.
So what are your thoughts about the fact that for the first time since its incorporation in 1925 that the Roanoke Bar Association now has a fully female board and officers?
Isn't that wonderful? I know. Yeah, that's great. And why not? Why not? Now, we're not imposing a quota. It doesn't need to be that way forever. We will let men on from time to time. But I think it's wonderful. And it's just a natural progression. We have more law schools. You know, the ratio, I mentioned the Bates ratio of 60% male, 40% women. Really, that is almost the law school ratio today in terms of 60% women, 40% men. Not that that's a ratio, but that just shows you that women in colleges are attracted to law school and what they can achieve as lawyers, because they see women lawyers doing amazing things throughout the country, and they say, you know, I can do that too, and I want to be part of that. So I think it's just amazing. I'm grateful that we have that, and you know, that's something that we should trumpet throughout the state and beyond, because it's a good thing.
So what other life accomplishments do you feel that you have that you're proud of, that are either law related or otherwise?
Well, you know, that's a good question. I don't know if there is anything. A lot of them are law related. I mean, I appreciate some of the pro bono things that I've been able to do over the years. Some of the nonprofits that I've been able to help foster their missions. Because I do think lawyers have an obligation to provide their services free of charge. And I appreciate legal aid, and of course that's part of what we can do, but for me that was just a small part of my pro bono activity, because I really thought that because my law practice was so focused on land use that I could be helpful to nonprofits that are kind of in that area. Certainly the political world was fun for me, and getting to be part of that. And I just remember being so amazed when I first went to the House of Representatives when Bob was sworn in, thinking that, here I am, an average person having this opportunity. And it really, it is, it just gives you an appreciation for this great country that we have. I've had opportunities from time to time to travel abroad, to see members of our State Department and how they interact in other states and how they represent our country and our citizens in other states. And I am so proud of what they do and what we stand for as a country. And so I'm just grateful that I've had all those experiences. It's just been pretty amazing. But notwithstanding all of the issues that we have and all of the turmoil that we view on TV every day and every night, this is an amazing country, and it's worth working to keep amazing. And that's why I think it's worth encouraging young people, especially young women, to get involved in a legal career, because I think good lawyers can make a huge difference in the direction that we head, and hopefully keeping us the type of country that we have been.
So you truly have been a trailblazer, not only for women in the law in Virginia and in particular in the Roanoke Valley, but also for the preservation and betterment of the Roanoke Valley. So what are your observations of the progress or lack thereof of the equality of women attorneys in Virginia, elsewhere, and women on the bench? Do you have any message you want to give women just coming into the practice of law today?
Well, I mean, I think young women coming into the practice of law are probably smarter than I was at the time when I came into the practice of law. For one thing, they've got a lot of mentors out there, and I think they're better able to feel free to ask questions and to stay in close touch with their colleagues, with their contemporaries, because we do have an amazing network of women across the Commonwealth, and we learn from each other. And I think young women are much better at doing that than I was when I first came into the practice of law. You know, I just think it's really important to have those dialogues. I think it's important for young women to get involved in the community. I think pro bono work is important of all stripes. I still think public service is a good thing. I encourage people, they don't have to be lawyers, but I encourage them, get involved in local government, get involved in your political party of choice. Because we need good Democrats, we need good Republicans, we need good independents in our country. We need people that are willing to do the right thing to further their goals, their priorities, and to work together with others. I think we're lacking a little bit in that direction, and I think lawyers have a unique ability to bridge some of those gaps, because, you know, as a lawyer in a case or in any kind of thing, we tend to understand the other person's side. We know what our side wants and needs and where we're heading, but I think we also, in order to represent our client, we need to understand what the other side wants, what their objectives are, and we'll talk to each other. We'll oftentimes find a compromise, find a solution, find something that's viewed as a positive for each side. Somebody gets something, somebody gives up something. As a society, we need more people that are willing to take that approach to solving problems, and lawyers are it, in my opinion, in my humble opinion.
So what would you most like your legacy to be?
Oh, well, I'm too young to be thinking about a legacy. I just really, maybe gratitude. I mean, I had an amazing experience to get to this point. I'm grateful that I did. I'm grateful that I listened to folks along the way that said, well, you can do a little bit more. You don't have to settle for this or that or the other. You can get here. And so I think we just need to all listen to those voices that encourage us to do a little bit more, try harder, and try to make a difference.
Thank you, Maryellen, for participating in this oral history project. I appreciate it.
And thank you, and thank the Women Attorneys Association for doing this, Sharon, because I think it's great to, you know, for whatever value they may have, to record these histories. I'm glad you're doing it with the women who were here when we kind of first started. That's great. So thank you. Thank you for volunteering. Thank you for doing all this. I think it's a good thing.
Thank you.